And the Australian Human Rights Commissioner in Paris, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you.
I'll just recap what we know so far, and that is that French television is reporting 118 people are known to have been killed so far in the multiple attacks in the capital in Paris. Now, I will just welcome viewers on ABC TV now who are joining us in our ongoing coverage of the Paris terrorist attacks. As I mentioned, at least 118 people have been killed that we know so far in these multiple attacks. Now, police are reporting 4 terrorists have been killed following the 7 coordinated attacks. Most of the victims were killed near the Bataclan Arts Centre. That incident, we understand, is now over. Other attacks hit a Cambodian restaurant and a bar not too far from that. Earlier, 3 people are known to have been killed in at least 2 blasts at the Stade de France, where a match was underway between France and Germany. Some reports suggest that that was a suicide blast, and military personnel are being deployed across Paris, and city authorities have asked people to stay indoors. Well, Nick O'Brien is an Associate Professor of Counter-Terrorism at the Charles Sturt University, and he joins me now. Thanks so much for speaking to us. What's your interpretation of what's happened? Multiple attacks, different types of attacks throughout one of the world's best known cities.
This is a picture of a very sophisticated operation. So not only there have been attacks in different locations, but they're using different means of attack. So in one instance at least, they've used bombs, possibly suicide attacks. They use siege hostage situation, and they've also used guns in an attack in the restaurant. So what we have is a sophisticated attack, not so much like the London attacks of 2005, which were 4 bombs meant to go off at once, and perhaps more with similarities with Mumbai, which was an attack that took place over a period of time.
What does it say about the, I guess perhaps the preparation that may have gone into this attack, in that, as you mentioned, we've seen explosions, we've seen hostages taken across multiple locations. How long do you think people would have been preparing for this, or was it a coincidence?
The chances of it being a coincidence are very, very small. It's there, but it's tiny. This has got all the hallmarks of a sophisticated operation that's perhaps been planned for weeks in advance. I know that yesterday it was announced that Jihad John had been killed, and some people are linking the killing of Jihad John to this attack. Very unlikely that they could bring off an attack like this in such a quick time, unless it was pre-planned and they were looking for a trigger to carry out the attack, and that was the trigger.
The government's response has been swift. Obviously, they've called in military. We're seeing live pictures here of authorities on the streets of Paris. The French President Francois Hollande has declared a national state of emergency. Borders have been closed. The metro has been shut down. Is this the appropriate response, do you think?
I think it's the appropriate response because they don't know what's coming next. They're very worried that this may not be the end of the series of attacks. There may be something coming after this. The police operations room will be in absolute chaos. They're looking at what could happen in the future. They're dealing with what's happening now, and they're also dealing with the incidents that have already happened and that are, to all extents and purposes, that are over. They'll be looking for things that perhaps we wouldn't normally consider, but they'd be looking for things like different mortuary sites for each of the locations, so there's no cross-contamination. The situation is it's not unfair, I think, to call it chaotic, and the French police are dealing with the best that they can. And I've worked with the French counter-terrorism police, and they're a very, very, very professional police outfit.
What do you make of the fact that we're yet to hear anybody or any group claim responsibility?
That doesn't surprise me. As soon as a group claims responsibility and that's been accepted, then the police and the intelligence agencies have got leads to work on. At the moment, we have chaos. The leads that they'll have are the people that have been killed or identified in the attacks, and there'll be an intelligence operation going on now to find out who these people are, who their associates are, what's known about them in different intelligence databases. And so really to the advantage of terrorists, I think, to leave any claims for a few days and to let the confusion continue.
We've heard that authorities have taken control of the hostage situation that was at that rock concert. How crucial was that in terms of ensuring that that didn't continue?
It was very, very crucial. We've now got a world media event. This has been covered by every news agency around the world, and quite rightly so. In a normal siege hostage situation, what you would do is you'd negotiate, and you would. The whole aim would be to get as many people out as live as possible. I think the fact that they've gone in very quickly, to me, indicates that they're convinced that this is an Islamist-related attack, possibly IS. And the reason they've gone is because they know that the people who have taken the hostages would actually want to die in the attack, and far better perhaps to go in and deal with it as quickly as possible and get as many people out alive, rather than let the terrorists inside plan to kill as many people as possible. I'm
speaking to Nick O'Brien. He's an Associate Professor of Counter-Terrorism at Charles Sturt University. You mentioned a little earlier that when we were talking about the response of the French government, and you alluded to the fact that they may be concerned that there may be more attacks. Do you think that that is likely?
At the moment, I'm hoping no. You never know in a situation like this, but it would seem to me that it's actually slowing down now. There's been no recent reported a new incident, so I would say that the French police are hoping that it's all over, but they won't be sitting back and just dealing with the incident that's happening at the moment. They'll be planning just in case there is anything more to come. They'll be deploying their resources all around Paris just in case there are more attacks.
We heard quite quickly from world leaders. We obviously heard from the French President Francois Hollande, the US President Barack Obama, British Prime Minister David Cameron, Ban Ki-moon. What does that say in terms of how quickly these world leaders responded to this incident?
I think that's the way we are now. Whenever there's an attack like this anywhere around the world leaders hear about it almost at the same time as it's happened. Through social media, through the embassies and through news media, and it's quite natural, I think, for world leaders to get on and offer their support and their condolences to the victims and their relatives.
Okay, Nick O'Brien from the Counter-Terrorism Unit at Charles Sturt University, thank you so much for your insights.
Pleasure, Rachel.
And speaking of those responses from world leaders, the French President Francois Hollande, as I mentioned, has declared a state of emergency for the whole of France and has decided to close the country's borders. Let's listen to some of what he said earlier.
Has been called.
Let's get an update on what we know so far. Now, there are reports that more than 140 people have been killed in multiple attacks in the capital, Paris. Now, that number does continue to change as more information comes to hand. Now, these, of course, are live pictures which we've been continuing to bring you throughout the day. Police are reporting 4 terrorists have been killed following the 7 coordinated attacks. Now, we can show you a map. Now, this, of course, is France and this is Paris, the capital. And these points here show you where some of these attacks have occurred. Now, most of the victims were killed near the Bataclan Arts Centre. That incident, we understand, is now over. Now, it was a packed concert hall with 1,500 people at a rock concert there. And it's believed 100 hostages were killed in that incident. 3 suspected attackers were killed as police stormed that facility. 40 other people are believed to have been killed in shootings across Paris and in the explosion at the Stade de France, where a match was underway between France and Germany. Other attacks hit a Cambodian restaurant and a bar. Military personnel, of course, have been deployed across Paris, and city authorities have asked people to stay indoors. And we've been hearing a lot about that and seeing pictures of that response as it continues well into the evening there in Paris. Here in Australia, the Foreign Minister Julie Bishop addressed the media a little earlier. She says there are no reports of Australians killed or injured in the attacks.
I have been in contact with our ambassador in France, Stephen Brady. There are no reports of any Australians killed or injured at this stage. However, there are 2,500 Australians registered in France at present. We believe the number of Australians in France would be much higher. We have offered all assistance to the French authorities, and we stand in solidarity with the French people in condemning these horrific and devastating attacks.
And the Foreign Minister says people who are in Paris should stay in their hotels or accommodation and, of course, follow the advice of local French officials. She's asked people who are there to ensure that they are registered with consular officials. In that media address, she mentioned that 2,500 people were currently registered, and she gave these numbers. People in Australia can call 1300 555 135. People outside of Australia have an alternative number, that is +612 6261 3306. Those numbers, of course, on your screen. The US President Barack Obama was quick to respond to these multiple attacks, and he sent a stern warning to those responsible that they will face justice.
We are reminded in this time of tragedy that the bonds of liberté and égalité and fraternité are not only values that the French people care so deeply about, but they are values that we share. And those values are going to endure far beyond any act of terrorism or the hateful vision of those who perpetrated the crimes this evening. We're going to do whatever it takes to work with the French people and with nations around the world to bring these terrorists to justice and to go after any terrorist networks that go after our people.
That, of course, the US President Barack Obama speaking not long after these attacks took place. And, of course, the French President Francois Hollande also spoke to his constituents in France, declaring, as we've been reporting, a state of emergency immediately after these multiple attacks.
France. L'état d'urgence, lui, sera proclamé sur l'ensemble du territoire.
The state of emergency will be applied to the whole French territory. I've also decided to close the borders. To make sure that those who've committed these crimes can be stopped if they are trying to leave the territory. It is a terrible, terrible event that is upon us.
That, of course, the French President Francois Hollande describing this as a terrible event, a sentiment that has been echoed by leaders around the world. And indeed, social media is a key component of how people are communicating with each other, how information is being shared about what is happening, how people indeed in Paris can get to safety. It's also a way for leaders to share their thoughts and their impressions on this tragedy. The Australian Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, tweeted saying that Australians' thoughts, prayers and resolute solidarity is with the people of France as they respond to this brutal terrorist attack in Paris. And the opposition leader Bill Shorten also used Twitter to communicate, saying the people of Paris are in his thoughts and prayers and the world will not give in to fear. And this is a sentiment that has been echoed by leaders around the world, that they will stand strong against these brutal attacks. Jeremy Fernandez.
Rachel, thank you for that update. Let's go to Nick O'Brien.